You know, they're developing ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missile. Why in heaven's name does Iran need intercontinental ballistic missiles? They don't need those missiles to reach Israel. They need it to reach Europe and the United States.
As Republicans settle in for another long fight against immigration, word has it the nation of Israel may be considering a fight of another kind, one designed to take out a nuclear threat before it even happens. Let's welcome to MidPoint legal analyst and expert, political commentator and activist, part of the Newsmax Insiders family, also author of Terror Tunnels, the case for Israel's just war against Hamas, Alan Dershowitz. Alan, always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Alan, let's get right to it. In the Jerusalem Post this weekend, Israel reconsiders military action against Iran, which would indicate a first strike. Would the Israelis really contemplate such a battle?
Well, if the alternative is to allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons, they've already sworn they would use them to annihilate Israel. The former moderate President Rafsanjani once said that if Iran develops nuclear weapons and drops a bomb on Tel Aviv, it will kill 3 million Jews, and that Israel will retaliate and drop a bomb on Tehran, killing 10 million Muslims, but the trade-off would be worth it because it would destroy the Jewish state, but the Muslim religion would still survive. You cannot allow a country with leaders like that to have access to nuclear weapons. They killed tens of thousands of their own children during the Iraq-Iranian war by sending them to certain death over minefields. They are a suicide nation. They're the world's greatest exporter of terrorism. And so Israel may have no choice. Really, it's all up to the United States. Will President Obama be Winston Churchill and Neville Chamberlain? If he allows Iran to develop nuclear weapons or even to become a threshold nuclear state, he will be remembered by history as the Neville Chamberlain of history, the man who brought health care to Britain, but who failed to recognize and prevent the greatest danger of the 20th century, namely Nazism. And the greatest danger of the 21st century is a nuclear-armed Iran with intercontinental ballistic missiles that could reach New York and Washington.
Are Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Secretary of State being played for fools at this point by the Iranian government?
Well, I think they're playing themselves a little bit for fools by saying that we need Iran to help us defeat ISIS. That's total nonsense. Iran needs us to defeat ISIS. ISIS poses no direct, immediate threat to the United States other than terrorism. And even if we destroy them on the ground, the threat of terrorism will persist. But ISIS poses an enormous threat to Shia Islam and to Iran, which is the major Shia country. So we shouldn't be giving concessions, nuclear concessions to Iran to get them on board the fight with ISIS. They should be making concessions to us to get us on board to help them fight ISIS. So the United States government has it absolutely backwards.
I apologize for my failure not to get John Kerry's name in there, but I also wanted to make that in, and you, of course, made the point. But with regard to an actual strike by Israel, though, Alan, would that not be a disaster if you think about how quickly that would spread throughout the Middle East, the powers it would bring in the United States, Russia, China, Pakistan, so many others? This would seem to be a conflagration that perhaps once started, we may not be able to pull back.
Well, it's the second worst solution. The first worst solution is to allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons. And if the only choices are Iran developing nuclear weapons or Israel doing what it did to the Asarik nuclear reactor in 1981, destroying Saddam Hussein's nuclear capacity, or what it did to the Syrian nuclear reactor several years ago, then it is a least worst alternative. And one would hope the United States would see that as well, because the United States could totally destroy Iran's nuclear capacity. Israel can only set it back for a few years.
Then about 40 seconds we have left. Then, in your opinion, why do we not do that? Why do we not have the spine to then walk into Iran, do what it takes, and make sure that the nuclear bomb itself is not an Iranian weapon?
I think the United States should announce that unequivocally we are, as our policy, against Iran developing nuclear weapons. We will do whatever it takes to prevent it. If sanctions work, fine. If diplomacy works, fine. If none of that works, then the United States should use its military facilities and ability to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons, yes.
Does Israel have enough, militarily speaking, if they were to stage a first strike, to defeat Iran quickly?
Well, to destroy parts of the nuclear facility, to set them back 2, 3, 5 years, yes. To set them back permanently, probably not, because Israel doesn't have the same kind of bunker-busting capabilities that the United States has. So, look, the best solution is a diplomatic one, sanctions, European community. But the worst solution is to allow Iran to become even a threshold nuclear state.
All right, Alan, please stand by. Major cities and small towns alike wait for the decision from Ferguson, Missouri. A peek behind the legal curtain with Alan Dershowitz after we take a break and come back, because as everyone waits, the grand jury still has not come through with a decision. Let's welcome back to MidPoint Newsmax legal analyst and political commentator Alan Dershowitz. Alan, let's go ahead and spin to Ferguson, Missouri. The last few days, well, actually the last few weeks, we've been hearing from a number of people who are very close to the case, mostly on the Michael Brown side of things, that there was no reason for a grand jury. This was simply done because it was a cop who was involved. They're screaming racism in this as well. They're also saying, why didn't you just take him to a jury trial? Find him guilty and let's get on with it. Again, we're talking about people who want justice, but it seems do not understand the justice system. Was the grand jury necessary?
Absolutely. These folks who are calling for a trial don't want justice. They want a particular result. Look, I studied this case very carefully. I pretty much know the law of murder. I have no idea whether or not the defendant is guilty or not guilty. The evidence should determine that. The forensics should determine that. What I have a great fear of is that the grand jury may be influenced by the fear of mob reaction. I mean, if the grand jury, if even one single grand juror says to himself or herself, my God, I have two choices. I could acquit him and there'll be riots in the street, maybe my home will be affected, or I can charge him, in which case, hey, I'm safe and I'm clear. You don't want that thumb to be on the scale of justice at all. Nobody should be rooting for an outcome here. Everybody should be rooting for the truth. And a grand jury is in a better position to make that determination because a prosecutor, particularly elected prosecutors, are much more influenced by public opinion. Grand jurors are supposed to be and may indeed be much less subject to the pressure, though I worry that these grand jurors may be subject to external pressures.
Is it fair to say then that those people who scream justice, yet at the same time and almost in the same sentence, they say that justice must mean an indictment, are a little more than a lynch mob?
Well, lynch mob overdoes it. They're not trying to lynch him. Lynch carries an enormous historical baggage with it. I would say they're hypocrites. They're not seeking justice. They're seeking a particular outcome. They want this guy to go to jail. They want him to be arrested, charged, and convicted. They don't know the facts any better than you or I do, but they are rooting for an outcome. Then there are others who are on the policeman's side who they don't want justice. They just want an acquittal. They want no charge. I think it's very hard to find people who actually want justice, who want to see the facts and the law determine the outcome of this horrible tragedy that has engulfed this city and similar tragedies engulfing so many other cities. We should never be rooting for an outcome. We should always be rooting for an objective assessment of what happened.
With regard to that, then, in your opinion, how troubling is it when you have people such as Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, now writing in USA Today that there's a full court press to put down an uprising around Ferguson, but no preparation for lifting up the people there? It seems as if there's a lot of people who claim to be trying to make things positive there, but at the same time are therefore little more than a reason to foment violence and stir the pot.
Well, first of all, everybody has the right to protest. Everybody has the right to object. Everybody has the right to call for an outcome. It may not be the wisest thing, but they have the right to do that. The line between fomenting and inciting violence and advocating strong positions is a difficult one. The courts have had a great deal of difficulty defining that line, but I think we should just let the process operate. We should take protective measures to make sure there is no violence, and that not only are the grand jurors protected, but the policeman's family are protected, the family of the alleged victim are protected, and that everybody is free to exercise their free speech and assembly rights without posing physical dangers.
I got about 90 seconds left. I do want to spin a little bit to the executive action from the president recently. And I've been asking so many different constitutional scholars, it's the first time that you and I have had a chance to talk about this. In your opinion, did the president violate the Constitution with his executive order?
The answer to that is crystal clear. No one knows. This is uncharted ground. Anybody who tells you the president violated the Constitution is wrong. Anybody who tells you the president didn't violate the Constitution is wrong. I understand the president doing what he did. I understand that. I understand Congress opposing it. And at this point in time, nobody knows the answer to that daunting constitutional question.
Would it be smart, in your opinion, at this point for Republicans basically to stop complaining about that and move forward and try to do something themselves instead of just sitting there whining?
Of course, they should clearly enact legislation to try to deal with this problem. We're not sending more than 10 million people out of the country. We're not sending young kids back. We're not sending people who have never been in Mexico back to Mexico. We're not going to do that. The question is, how do you deal with this problem in a sensible way? Legislation is obviously the better route, but I understand the president's frustration, and he is, by the Constitution, designed to enforce the laws, and he's decided to enforce them in this manner. Congress clearly has the ability to trump him, but they have to act. They can't just silently complain.
And we got about 90 days or so left, from what I understand, before everything actually takes effect. So it's going to be an interesting holiday season for everybody. Alan Dershowitz, thank you so much. A very happy Thanksgiving and a happy holiday and a safe one to you and your family. Let me also remind everybody that your book is Terror Tunnels. We talk about it here, and certainly we will continue. Alan, take care. Great holiday.
Thank you. You too.
All right. There are more than 35 million of these people around the world. Their numbers are growing, and it's mostly lip service in seeking to free them from slavery. That's up next after a short break. And at 43 minutes after the hour, the unintended and intelligent victims of Barack Obama's executive action. Those who say that perhaps the president did not do everything that they need. That's coming up right here on MidPoint, where every day we question everything.